For 3 decades, Johnny Carson didn't just host The Tonight Show, he ruled it like a kingdom. To America, he was the charming Midwesterner invited into living rooms every night. But behind that smile was a man with a memory sharper than steel. A man who never forgot, never forgave, and could end a career with a single quiet decision. Those who worked closest to him all whispered the same warning, "Cross Carson once, and you vanished forever." Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on the 8 guests Johnny Carson hated so deeply, so completely that he banned them for life, no second chances, no apologies accepted. These are the betrayals, explosions, and scandals that shook late-night television to its core. And trust me, you've never heard these stories like this. Among the many legends that echo through the hallways of NBC studios in Burbank, none are more chilling than the stories of guests who were quietly or violently erased from The Tonight Show during Johnny Carson's reign. These bans weren't just about mistakes made on camera. They revealed the hidden rules of loyalty, respect, and control that govern the most powerful late-night throne in television history. Tonight, we begin with the most heartbreaking ban of them all, the fall of Joan Rivers. Joan Rivers wasn't just another guest. She was Carson's protégé, the one he personally lifted into a position no other woman in comedy had reached before. He believed in her talent, trusted her instincts, and hand-selected her as the permanent guest host of The Tonight Show. To Rivers, Carson became the closest thing she had to a father figure in a brutal industry. To Carson, she was rare, a comedian he genuinely respected and personally liked. Their bond went beyond business into private dinners, mentorship, and public validation during a time when women in comedy were treated as outsiders. Then, in 1986, everything shattered. A brand new network, Fox, offered Joan Rivers her own late-night show, one that would directly compete with Carson. She struggled with the decision, terrified of the conversation she knew she had to have with him. But that conversation never happened. Instead, the news leaked to the press. Johnny Carson learned of the betrayal not from Joan herself, but from a Variety headline. Witnesses say he turned pale, not with rage, but with heartbreak. "She didn't even call me," he quietly said before closing his office door. That door never reopened. From that moment on, Joan Rivers was completely erased. She was banned from The Tonight Show, her name was removed. Her past appearances disappeared from the archives. For the rest of Carson's life, they never spoke again. The ban lasted until 2014, 9 years after Johnny Carson's death. And even near the end of her life, Joan Rivers admitted that losing Carson's friendship was the deepest wound she never recovered from. But betrayal wasn't the only path to exile. Another unforgettable ban came from a confrontation unlike anything in the show's history. The day Wayne Newton stormed into NBC studios. For years, Carson teased Newton in monologues, jokes about his Vegas image, his eternally youthful look, even hints at his private life. But when Carson joked about his sexuality on air in an era when such implications could ruin careers, Wayne Newton decided enough was enough. He didn't send a lawyer. He didn't call the network. He walked straight into Carson's office unannounced. According to witnesses, Newton told him, "Make another joke about my sexuality and I'll kick your ass." That was a line Carson never allowed anyone to cross. He stood up towering over Newton and said, "Get out of my office before I have you thrown out." From that moment on, Wayne Newton was banned forever from The Tonight Show. For Carson, a threat was unforgivable, and Newton's national exposure took a major hit as a result. Then there was Charles Grodin, the actor and comic known for his dry, deadpan wit. His appearances on The Tonight Show began as brilliant comedy mock hostility, fake arguments, playful tension that the audience loved. But over time, Grodin pushed the act too far. His confrontational persona became so convincing that viewers no longer knew if it was a joke. Worse, during one appearance in 1990, Grodin veered into painful territory by mocking Carson's sincerity, hinting that he didn't care about his guests or the show. These weren't jokes to Carson. They pierced insecurities he kept tightly hidden. Behind the scenes, a camera operator noticed the tight smile, the sign every crew member recognized as Carson reaching his limit. During the commercial break, he uttered 4 final words. "We're done with that." Charles Grodin was never booked again. On the opposite end of the spectrum lay Shelley Winters, the legendary actress whose volatile personality became infamous in Hollywood. She had been on The Tonight Show multiple times, often charming, often chaotic. But in 1975, she arrived drunk, disoriented, interrupting Carson and derailing the conversation. Still, Carson remained patient until a harmless joke about her weight triggered a sudden explosion. Without warning, Winters grabbed her drink and hurled the entire glass of whiskey into Carson's face. The studio gasped. Carson called for a commercial and walked off stage drenched and furious. Winters was escorted out of NBC studios and never invited back. Humiliating Carson wasn't just unprofessional, it was an offense he never forgave. Few bands were as mysterious as the disappearance of Rich Little, one of Carson's most beloved guests. Little's impressions were legendary, and he'd appeared more than 30 times. Then suddenly nothing. No scandal. No argument. Just a silent exit. Years later, former staffers revealed the truth. Carson found him exhausting. Little stayed in character constantly, during rehearsals, during breaks, backstage. What audiences loved for 10 minutes, Carson endured for hours. And worse, Carson realized Little was recycling old material. For a host who demanded freshness and originality, that was a quiet betrayal. Carson simply stopped booking him. Rich Little never returned to The Tonight Show, despite never being formally banned. But perhaps the most painful on-air collapse came from author Truman Capote, the brilliant mind behind In Cold Blood and Breakfast at Tiffany's. By 1975, Capote's life was unraveling under the weight of addiction. And when he walked onto Carson's stage, it was clear he wasn't well. He slurred his words, lost his train of thought, and drifted into inappropriate stories that risked violating broadcast standards. Carson tried every trick: gentle questions, humor, redirection, but nothing worked. He eventually cut the segment short, a nearly unprecedented move. During the break, he leaned in and said softly, "You're not well tonight, Truman." Capote was never invited back. Carson wasn't judging the man, he was protecting the integrity of The Tonight Show and the trust of the viewers who welcomed him into their homes each night. Then there were the legendary Smothers Brothers, Tom and Dick, masters of political satire whose groundbreaking CBS variety show had already ruffled feathers with its fearless anti-war commentary. Their humor wasn't just funny, it was bold, provocative, and deeply political. Exactly the kind of material that made television history. But for Johnny Carson and The Tonight Show, it was a line too far. Carson believed the show should be a refuge, a light-hearted escape from the turmoil of American politics. A place where viewers could laugh without controversy. During a 1970 appearance, Tom Smothers couldn't resist veering off script, delivering an unplanned anti-war speech on national television. Carson completed the interview with professionalism, but backstage he made his feelings clear. Too much trouble for what we get. From that moment, the brothers fell into what staff called Carson purgatory. They weren't officially banned, but they were carefully avoided, restricted, and rarely invited back unless they promised to leave politics at the door. Their wit had collided with the rules of late-night entertainment and paid the price. And finally, the man who symbolized the chaotic future Carson feared, Morton Downey Jr. Loud, aggressive, confrontational, Downey embodied the rise of shock television. Booking him was controversial from the start. When he walked onto the stage in 1988, he ignored protocol, played to the audience, interrupted Carson, and brought his signature chaos to a stage built on dignity and control. Carson's icy expression said it all. After Downey criticized other talk show hosts, clearly including Carson, Johnny made his decision. After the show, he told his producer, "That's not television. That's a circus." Downey was never invited back. When you look at these 8 bands, a portrait emerges, one far more revealing than any monologue or interview. Johnny Carson was a master of grace and calm, but he guarded his world fiercely. Loyalty mattered. Professionalism mattered. Respect mattered. And his stage, The Tonight Show, filmed inside the iconic NBC studios in Burbank, was sacred ground. Anyone who violated that ground, whether through betrayal, aggression, humiliation, chaos, or politics, found themselves quietly but permanently removed from the kingdom. In the end, the real Johnny Carson wasn't just late night's king, he was its gatekeeper. And once he closed the gate, it never opened again. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more shocking Hollywood secrets. Thanks for watching.